Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
As you know, the Meat Eater Live Tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.
As a guide and hunter, I've spent thousands of days in the field. This show is about translating my hard-won experiences into tips and tactics that'll get you closer to your ultimate goal, success in the field. I'm Remy Warren. This is Cutting the Distance. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. This week is our final live Q&A at the Pope and Young Club Convention. And there's still some great questions raised about hunting tactics that I think will really help a lot of hunters out there this season. So let's jump into part 3 of Live at the PNY.
I have 2 young boys, and what western state would you suggest me to concentrate on them for a youth elk hunt?
A western state to concentrate for elk? Are you thinking like something where
over the counter, something over the counter somewhere?
Yeah.
Nothing crazy access for a kid or anything like that.
Yep.
But something where the kids need to work and earn it. That's for sure.
Okay, I think that. I would say I think everybody's like, oh, go to Colorado. There's a couple people from Colorado. Don't go to Colorado. But that's not actually what I like to say is it depends on where you live, because the best place to hunt is somewhere that you can go and it's not so far away. So you might hear of a unit all the way across, a 18, 20-hour drive from you. It's like, oh, that place is on fire right now. But I'd rather pick the spot that's 4 or 5 hours away that you can get into, that you can maybe spend a summer in. So for living in California, the closest over-the-counter tag is Oregon, and you're going to find some good hunting. It's just like anything, where you spend your time and where I think there's where's the best place to kill a bull? Where's the best place to kill a buck? Anywhere you got a tag. And probably the best place is anywhere you can get a tag multiple times in a year, and anywhere that you can access and maybe put in a little bit of time before and after the season. Because if you're close enough where you can maybe make a summer trip out of it with the family, and you can go and get some summer scouting intel, because that's one of the easier times to actually find animals, mostly for deer, but for elk as well. And then you can say, okay, well now we've put in a little bit of time here. Now we can go back into that unit. It's close enough. We can make a trip out of it, and we can do this 2 or 3 years in a row. It's going to be time well spent, as opposed to chasing the best unit or chasing this or chasing that. Just picking something that you can access and go to.
I think you mentioned south-facing slopes. Could you talk a little bit about that in your experience with whatever direction facing slopes there are and how that impacts elk, for instance, movements, biology?
Yeah, so the south slope, it gets more sun, so it's going to be the dry side. The north face is that wet side. The north face is more of bedding areas, thick cover, safety. Oftentimes the north face is steeper because it gets more water, more precipitation, more runoff, you know? So it's holding that water, it's holding that snow, then it's flushing it down at a faster rate. So it actually creates like oftentimes a more steeper part of the mountain, whereas the south face is often drier and more gentle. You look at a big mountain, it's like the north face, the company North Face, it's like big steep mountains because that's the hard one to climb. But the south face is where it's especially for elk going to provide that food and that forage. So, there is that kind of thought of kind of picking your areas that you hunt based on the orientation of the mountain, but not all mountain ranges go north, south, east, west, but it's just saying like, where's the drier side? Where's the different, so like based on those two sides of the mountain, you got two completely different types of habitat. And that can even be on one ridge. Now, I'm not saying like the north side of a mountain. I'm saying like the north face of that one ridge will be that drier side, and then the other side will be the bedding side. So what they're going to do is they're going to be popping out of the south side over into the north face, feeding, and then dropping back and bedding into the south face. It makes it a little easier to kind of narrow down. And then so what I would do, how I would expand on that is I would say, where's the predominant wind direction? So I would go, okay, maybe look at the predominant wind direction there. And I would say, where's the wind blowing down over that south face? And then you can kind of figure out, like, based on those kind of things, start pinpointing, okay, here's where I'm going to start my hunt. So here's where I'm going to start looking, because they're going to bed in that safety and they've got that food nearby.
Say you got a mule deer bedded at 30 yards. You're in range, all you can see is the tip of his horns. You feel the wind changing, you want to get that deer to stand up before he blows out from your scent. What's your best way to get the deer to stand up?
Oh, that's a good question, because I've tried them all and I haven't found a best way. It's one of those things, you're going to do something and it'll either be the right thing or the wrong thing. I will tell you all the things I've tried. I have done the rock toss. My buddy Chris has done it successfully. I've had a lot of rock tosses go wrong. I think one thing that I tend to do is it depends on. I try not to do it too loud, but like I like to, if I'm like, this is going to be bad, sometimes I'll actually just start my draw cycle, and that sound of the draw is enough to make them curious, but not enough to spook them. So I'll draw, but there's been times where I was like, draw, and they just don't even care. And you're like, okay. And then it's like let down. And I've gotten 5 draws on one deer, but that one time the trouble is you sometimes they draw and they look at you, but at that point it might already be too late. You're already settled in and you're ready, and then let her rip. I've done the this was, you'd probably be like, that was a terrible idea, but that giant buck that I was talking about, I snuck in 33 yards to that deer. And I just had his head and neck above the sage. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. I was just waiting. And I'm like, okay. And then I was 33 yards. And this is like, I didn't know anything about anything really, but I knew how to get close to stuff and what a big deer was, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to sneak up. I was been there for hours. And I was like, I'm going to sneak up 3 more yards. So okay. So I'm like, just so it's like an even 30, just might as well. I got bored, whatever. So I'm like, oh, maybe it'll get him, stand. So I start creeping up 3 more yards. And then I'm like, so I'm there now 30 yards, and I feel the wind shift. And just like, and I'm like, as soon as I felt that wind, I drew back, and that buck just blew out of there. And I was like, damn it. And I thought to myself, like, what would I have done different? And I thought, I'll just shoot him in the back of the head next time. Doesn't work, because I tried it once and it didn't work. A deer went away with an arrow stuck in his antler, and I was like, well, that's the last time I'll ever try that. Say that again? Yeah, I have done the grunt as well. One thing, I've had it work out and I've had it not. Generally they're more calm, kind of like with elk. I would do the elk call for sure, because they're more used to the sound. The grunt call like will stop them, but they always kind of like, mule deer for some reason look up first. They're like, instead of like the stand up and look. And I think it just, I think that kind of like, oh, I'm already at full draw, I did the grunt and whatever. One time I did a turkey call and it worked really well. So I was just like, the deer stood up and didn't even care. So I was like, I don't know, I've tried it all and I just don't know. I think over time, the best option has kind of been, it's like whatever you feel in the moment. But I think the the drawing thing generally works for me because it's just enough time that they like stand up. Like they're like, do I get out of here? Stand up. And then it's like arrow's gone. But there are those times where they don't even hear it. And you
Whatever you do, you got to draw first.
You got to draw first. Yes, absolutely.
Have you used a grunt call on coos deer in the rut?
Yes. Yeah. I find that they're more susceptible to rattling. But I have used the grunt. I've also used like even just like standard whitetail, like snort wheeze. But I think that rattling is the most effective call for coos deer. Well, I take that back. Rattling and distress call, which seems interesting, but I feel like the distress call doesn't get used enough. And most deer, I've been pretty successful calling in deer, all species of deer, with a distress call. Just a wounded deer. It's got two effects. They run away or they run to you. But when they run to you, it's really awesome. But it works really well too in more arid places. So that's why I think it works on the coos deer and desert mule deer pretty well. I don't know why that is. They're just maybe more. Maybe there's like that higher. Like they're kind of a smaller deer, and I think coyotes probably can kind of get on them any time of year. So they group up and they defend whatever's in distress. I kind of started using that call after I was stalking in on this group of deer in the high country in Nevada, actually. And there was this little fawn that kind of ran away from the herd, and this coyote came just barreling in there, and I heard, Meh! And that entire herd of deer, 30 deer, like just every deer in the bushes, busted out and chased that coyote out. And there was 3 bucks in that group with those does, and they came too. And I was like, okay. And I've tried it, and I've had bucks come running in. Or, you got to it's got to be kind of the right scenario. You look for a scenario where there's deer with fawns. So during the rut, it works best because it's actually the does that are more doing it, and then the bucks come with. But they get super I don't even know the best way. Like they get super dumb when that distress call is coming out. I don't know if you've ever. It works really well on javelinas as well. Javelina distress call, and they come running in and charging, and it works one time. After that, they get super wise to it, but the first time they're kind of dumb and they stand there and they're like, "What's going on?" And they keep coming back and investigating. So you just kind of got to commit to it if you decide to try that. But it also works is like when things don't work out, blow the distress call. Yeah.
What are the chances of calling a herd bull downhill during a rut?
Not real good. I found the herd bull's he's already got his thing, and you kind of got it. The best way to kill a herd bull during the rut is to actually dog him, and to get to a point where he kind of feels like when he's uphill, he kind of has the advantage and he knows it. So he's like, well, come up to me. But they don't like when they have the disadvantage. So generally what will happen is when you get that herd in kind of a frenzy and they start moving off, and you'll know okay, the herd's starting to split up. That's when your best chance to call in the herd bull, because things are going on and things are getting chaotic. That's when other satellite bulls start peeling cows off. And it is a super physical task, but what I do is I call it dogging the bull. So I'll just start following and bugling, keep that herd just going, keep that noise going, and keep that bull going. And I found that right when they crest over, so when that bull crests over the hill, I want to be right at that ridge and let out the meanest bugle you've ever made. And 9 times out of 10, that bull will whip around and come right back up to you. And it's just something those bulls don't like about that. They don't like somebody else, because that's a dominant position, and you're letting out that mean dominant bugle, and they just don't like that. I would say all the herd bull. I would say all. If I think about it, most. I have called in a couple herd bulls up, but most of the herd bulls that I've called in my life have been from being above them, not below them. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, no, I can't even think of a single one that I've called downhill, really. Does anybody think of some good ones that they've called in from down below? No. I don't know what it is. They're like, well, if you think you're tough, come up here and fight me. And then when you're above them, they're like, oh, he thinks he's tough. Oh, no, he's above me. The cows are going to think I'm weak. I better go get him. It's just some weird thing that they don't like. Anybody else?
In your opinion, what's the easiest and toughest deer to hunt? Or is there a difference?
I think personally, early season, mature mule deer are the hardest deer to hunt. And there's a couple reasons for that. I've said that for a very long time. And I think that actually, out of all the North American species that I've been fortunate enough to chase, I think the mature mule deer is one of the, I mean, it's like, for me, it's like, that's probably like the trophy of trophies, because they, you know, like everything else has like a really good, like something or a season or something where you can exploit a weakness. And I kind of like build my hunting philosophies around that. It's like, how do you get in and you find that one little chink in the armor? Mule deer, though, it's like, well, whitetails, they can be patternable, or you know, they can follow a route and you can ambush them. You know, blacktails is a very difficult hunt, but they also have, like, a blacktail is the perfect mix between a mule deer and a whitetail. So they do have those patternable tendencies. Mule deer is like, it's one of the only animal. I mean, you know, it's like one of the animals that it's a pure spot and stock game most of the time. Like you have to sneak in and get it, and that's what makes it so difficult. And they generally like don't lend themselves, like, you know, there's young dumb deer for sure. Like there's those ones that are just like, hey, I'm 5 yards off the road, and you know somebody drove up and got me. But there are, you know, like early season, especially when they're hiking, they're just smart. They're keyed in. They've got their ears out. They're listening. They've got great sense of smell, great sense of sight. I think it's a pretty hard one to do because, you know, like elk, you can call in. They just aren't really as susceptible to those tactics, and they are patternable in a way that like makes you think that you can anticipate them, but they will like, yeah, they're coming out here every day, and then you go sit there and they're coming out, 300 yards that way, you know? So I think that's probably, in my opinion, that. I'm sure somebody else might have some other, but you know, then you're talking about like, oh, okay, well, I've spot and stalked a lot of whitetails, and that's really difficult because in that thick, crunchy stuff, they're super keyed in. But you know, you can also change your tactics up. And the same with mule deer. I mean, you could sit water, but they generally don't hit the same water very often. They're just a little more nomadic, a little less predictable. We'll do a couple more questions if anybody's got a few. Yeah, go for it.
You obviously do DIY stuff and you guide. When you get guys that are primarily DIYing camp and you're guiding them, what mindset do you want the DIY guy to bring to you as a guide?
Yeah, that's a great question because I've been that guy. And, you know, I think like the best, you know, if you're with a guide and an outfitter that really knows what they're doing, you know, I think the best thing is like you bring the skills that are needed for you as the hunter, and then, you know, like don't let them second guess themselves. You know what I mean? Your best opportunity with somebody that really knows what they're doing is let them do what they know to do, you know? But also like bring the things that you can bring, which is be prepared with your shooting, be able to physically keep up. You know, I was like, well, I could go out and shoot an elk. I mean, I don't mean to be like, oh yeah, pat yourself on the back. Like, I feel like I could go out on public land and pretty much shoot, if I'm just like not trying to film it or whatever, shoot a bull any day of the week with my bow. And it's because like I can get after the elk. I can go in, I can do what it takes. And if somebody can stick with me and do that, then everybody's chances increase, you know? And so you're obviously hiring that person for a reason. And so whether it's their knowledge of the area, whether it's their experience calling, whatever it is, then like, you know, be there and just be able to keep up, to do what they can do and like hunt like with them. And I think that's going to be the best recipe for success. You know, and because sometimes they'll be like, oh, what do you think? You know, and mostly it's just like, tell me what to do, you know? And I've even been that person like, you know, I'm here, I'm with you, you know these animals. Let's do what you know is right. Because once you start getting the group think and everybody puts in their 2 cents, most of the time instantaneous decision making went out the window, and then it's like catering to someone else's needs. But if you can be that person that can just like, I just want to, we're just hunting like you would hunt, then you're going to have a lot more success. But I also know that that's not always possible. So does that make sense? Yeah, can I answer it?
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way that they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
I think I heard you say you were going to open a bow shop in Reno. Is that?
Yeah, so Tim Burnett, that we does Solo Hunter with me, he opened a bow shop. It's over on Longley. So yeah, it's just getting fired off. So the doors are open. There's still some bows and boxes everywhere, but yeah, it's pretty much up and running. So we're pretty stoked on that. Go for it.
When practicing shooting a bow, what's your opinion on shooting in like awkward situations and positions?
Yeah, that's like my number one thing. When I shoot, everything I do is really focused on bow hunting. Like I mean, I love archery, but I don't really care to shoot paper at all. I mean, I do. I love to shoot a bow. I love the act of shooting a bow. And I understand a lot of people get into bow hunting through archery, but I got into bow hunting through hunting, if that makes sense. So it's like everything I do is so focused on hunting. So when I'm practicing, I like to, anything that I do, I like to practice like I'm doing. So that is like practicing those types of things. Through the years, the way that I've adjusted my practice is being like, if I go on a hunt and I like say missed a shot or did something, like made a bad shot, whatever. I really replay those things in my head. And then I go throughout the year and adjust those things. One thing that I realized that I was doing, the number one shot that I would miss is like, generally when I'm stalking in, I always try to come in from above. I think it's the most effective way to get in close. So I'd come in from above and then I'd be, say a steep hill and I've got the deer below me. I'm looking at the deer. I draw back down low out of sight and then I get everything settled and I slowly start raising up. And then as soon as I can see that animal, then I'm like, I don't want to get all the way up and be skyline. So I'm like crouched halfway down like this, and then I'm off kilter. It's probably some kind of slope of the hill. And I would downhill shooting in like a squat position. I muffed more of those shots than I care to think about. And it like never even dawned to me until I was like, started really going like, okay, I've missed a couple of those. And then I start practicing those and on like weird pitches of hill and things like that. And then over the years, you just find a better way to center yourself to keep that, to keep everything level, to a different way of leaning into the hill and a different way of in shooting. And then there's sometimes too where I've said, that's not the most efficient way that I could have made that shot. Instead of being in a squat position, like I'm doing a chair pose, why didn't I just go up to one knee and, keep my left knee down and my right knee up and do it that way? Or, maybe I didn't have enough lift for that. So maybe it's like, why didn't I just go from here to actually just committing to being full up and locked in and steady and take that shot? So, but I do like to practice all those awkward positions, all those like hunting focused things throughout like the year. And then another thing I love to do, and I think is like the traditional hunters will know, but like roving practice. Like I'll get a rubber blunt tip on, and whether it's my recurve, longbow, compound bow, I love to just like walk around in areas, types of places that I'm hunting and shoot pine cones and rocks and dirt clods, because it's like that practice in the hill. That's like, we aren't setting up a target. We don't have to do anything. We can just send it and, like get that practice of those, like I'll just be like, that's a deer down there in my mind, raise up, shoot, and just keep moving and hike and carry it around and maybe shoot jackrabbits or whatever. But just like that act of being in the field, getting those like in the field shots, you're dealing with wind, you're dealing with terrain, you're dealing with who knows what weather. And I even bring those on every hunt, especially backcountry hunts, because it's a good way to like shoot your bow in camp and make sure that everything's like, you took a tumble down the mountain, make sure everything's working right. Like just shoot the blunt tip at something, dirt, clod or whatever in camp or in the field.
What's your sight setup? Do you prefer like a 1-pin, or a 3-pin or 5-pin, or what are the advantages for each?
Yeah. I started out with, I used to love like a big multi-pin 7-pin sight. Now I shoot the Spot Hog Fast Steady XL. So it's a single pin sight, but it's got the 2 indicators. So I'm essentially shooting a 2-pin with a single pin. I switched to that maybe 4 years ago. And I think it was, I don't know, like you do something so long and you think like, oh, this is the best system. And then I don't even know why I decided to switch to that. And it's just been a lot better for me. I think the first thing I noticed about it, the first animal I shot with it, that sight, I was like, man, I can see everything. And I can actually see the animal and anticipate their movements a little better and like just really get a feel for everything that's going on while I'm at full draw. And my brain just clicked with that system. I will say maybe starting out, you'll be practicing and you go back and you're like, oh, okay. And then you walk to 30 yards and you just shot way over your target and broke an arrow because your sight was set at 85 and you're like, dang it. But over time I got used to adjusting it. Now the 2-pin thing in the single pin is good because I can set it. Like I'll just set it at 33 yards walking around and I can essentially shoot out to 60 yards without even adjusting it if I had to. Because I know the drops and everything. When I first started switching over to that single pin system, I did have one thing where I was hunting fallow deer in Australia and I had this buck and I'm like, okay, he's coming in and I set my pin and then he walked like way closer. And my brain was like, I know all the drops down. I don't know all the drops up. Luckily I just held under his belly, shot, perfect shot. But it really clicked in my head like, okay, I'm always going to undershoot the score and use the other. And I'd rather hold over. But also during my practice, I started doing a lot of undershooting and really knowing okay, if I had that pin set at 50 and I need to shoot at 30, where do I hold? But I would more adjust my pin where it's like my bottom pin would be that yardage and I'd rather hold the bottom pin high than shoot underneath something. But the major downside to the single pin and what I really miss about multiple pins is knowing your trajectory of your arrow and understanding whether you're going to hit a branch at 20 yards or not. Because I would always draw back if it's at 30 yards or 40 yards and my 20-yard pin is centered on a limb. It's like, okay, tweak it a little bit. It's a little harder to thread the needle with a single pin, but I don't know, the benefits outweigh each other. Now, another good option would be like a 3-pin slider or something like that. But I've tried everything and I just kind of settled on this one for me personally. Yep.
A number of years ago, I think I seen a picture, you killed a really heavy antlered mule deer in the desert stuff, rocks and that.
Yep.
What's your biggest takeaway from that hunt? Biggest thing we can learn from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a part of it is there's that thing about patience and then moving at the right times. It was so many hunts, it's you see something and you got to be there right now. The way that I got that deer was it was moving up the canyon and I was I had a friend with me actually and I was we're running to the top of this thing. We need to get to the top before those deer. And I sprinted to the top. It was everything I could do to get up there. And then it was almost a second too late. Those bucks were coming out and I just laid down. The first deer had kind of seen something. I laid down and I've done this many times with deer or whatever. It's being able to freeze and not freak out. Just I laid there and I'm you know what? If I got to take a nap, I will take a nap. Get yourself comfortable in that freeze position because you don't want to be in this position, one leg out because it's not going to work out for you. But get yourself comfortable. Get and be I don't even need to look, and just let them acclimate to the presence of you, and in some ways. The rest of the deer fed around and fed off. I ended up not spooking them, which is the goal. And the big buck wasn't with them. But I knew that between me and the bottom of the hill, there was only one tree. And that big buck, I was like, well, I'm going to stalk to that one tree because I wonder if that deer just knew something those other deer didn't. Is like, I'm going to bed here. I stalked down to that tree, and I didn't see the deer. I was like, he's not here. But one thing that I stress, no matter what you're hunting, is I do this tactic of simultaneously assuming two things. I always assume that the deer has never left, and I always assume that they have. Like, how do you do that? Because what that means is as I'm stalking to that spot, I'm never going to second guess that it isn't there. I'm going to say, like, I'm stalking to the spot 100% knowing that he's there, but I'm also telling myself in my head, he probably moved. So that means that I have to be paying 100% attention to everything around so I don't miss or misstep or miss going through something. And it's like just kind of this mantra in my head of like telling myself, I'm always expecting him to be there, because I've had those hunts where like a deer's bedded under a tree. I stalk in, I get to 20 yards, and I was like, the deer's not here. What's up? And I stand up, and that deer was asleep and blows out. And you're like, wow, that sucked. Or there's times where you stalk in, you're like, he's there. You're so laser focused on that one spot, and then he blows out 15 yards to your right, and your brain didn't even. So I'm constantly assuming both things, and by that, I'm really just saying you're paying attention to everything. And so stalking into that, he wasn't there, but I set up like he was. And it was kind of like one of those things like, wind shift. I did see another buck there, and I was like, okay, this other buck is probably going to see me. He might blow out a smaller buck. And the second that deer ran out, I was already at full draw and made that grunt sound. And I mean, like, I've listened to rewatch videos that I've filmed or whatever, and I'm always whistling or grunting. For some reason, people are, why you whistle at a mule deer? That high pitched sound actually kind of distracts them a little bit. Just making that noise is like, if you know they don't know what they got spooked with, they stop and look. And at that point, it's already too late. Arrow was on its way. And I got that deer. So this is like just one of those things where you kind of have to put everything together. But that, being patient at the right time, going fast when you need to, and then simultaneously assuming they're there and assuming they aren't. And if you add all those together, you're going to be pretty successfure.
You're a heck of an athlete because you can run with the arrow.
Yeah, it's definitely an advantage, but you got to figure out the things that like, okay, maybe you can't, but then it's like, okay, well, figure out that thing that you're good at. Maybe it's like, hey, for something like that, like I can't make it up there. Then you know what I would do? I would almost back out and say, I need to get a good view of this, and I'm going to watch those things until they bed. So it's just a different tactic, but basing on that, that's kind of like the same thing as like, okay, what's a good strategy for what's going on right here, and for your like what you think you can do, and then I think that's like a good way to kind of mix all the things together. Yeah.
Do you use a handheld thumb release or a trigger release?
I use a wrist strap trigger release. I think I've had the same one for like, I've only had 2 in my life, and they're the same like one's. It's pretty old, but I just like it. I know that it's like. I don't really know, because my way into archery was me teaching myself, and I learned a lot of bad things. I guess I got into compound shooting based on like, I just shot a traditional bow from when I was a kid. My teacher was Byron Ferguson, books of just like Be the Arrow. I learned to shoot. I had a string with a softball in the backyard, and I would swing the softball. I never shot at a stationary target until I was like, got a compound bow. He was like, that's how I shot. Just swinging, moving things and shooting them, which was really good. But when it came to, compound bow shooting, I didn't understand sights. I didn't understand any of that. So I had a lot of really bad habits that later on, people were like, well, you'll develop target panic. And I think just shooting at probably paper targets, I would, but my mind's just so focused on hunting that I think I was fortunate to not do that. I know, I think if I was to restart, I'd probably go with the, like a different release, but for me it works, So, and I do now, I actually have pretty much every release ever made, and I will go out and I will shoot with multiple releases. Like if I'm shooting really bad, I'll just throw a back tension release on and shoot a few with that, or I'll use my wrist release and hold it in here and fire it off with my pinky. And I constantly like change up the way that I'm shooting. So I like to have like multiple options, but I always hunt with the wrist release. And because one of my like mantras, another thing hunting, like a lesson learned, my rule is like my release will be on my wrist or on my bow, because I have guided and I have come into encounters with I had a client one time, like I'm like calling, and he's up there and he's ready. And I call in this herd bull, and he walks past him at like 15 yards and nothing happens. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? And he's like, I don't have he came back. He's like, I don't have my release. Like he went to the bathroom, he set the release down and had no release. And this elk came in and he just missed his opportunity. And I ended up getting some P cord out and making a release by doing like a kind of like a trucker's hitch where he can like run it through, back it, and then hold it between his fingers, draw back, and then just open his hand like this. It ended up working, but he didn't, we ended up hiking back out and going. I actually had another release. And from that moment on, I actually started putting a spare release in my pack when I was guiding. But I've even had an encounter with a whitetail where it's like, I learned that lesson myself, where it's like going in to an area, had my release in my, I can't even remember. I couldn't even find it. It was like just going in here. I think it was in my backpack or something. And I'm like, oh, big buck. The same buck that I've been trying to hunt all season is right here at 30 yards bedded. And I'm like, where's my freaking release? I was like, okay, I've been there. So that's one reason I like the wrist release. I always know where it is. It's on my wrist or on my bow. Yeah, cool. I think that's one last question. Yeah.
2 questions. What method do you use when you shoot traditional, and how much do you shoot traditional versus compound when you hunt?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm like I said, I kind of shoot a little bit of every way. I mean, I shoot split fingers. It just depends on my bow. Like I've got certain bows. Yeah, I think it's a combination. It's more instinctive than aiming, but I do use like point on like my, point on target kind of thing. It really depends. Like I've got one recurve that I shoot one way, and I've got a longbow that I shoot another way. I like to kind of just shoot all different ways, and I kind of change over, it just depends on how that bow feels to me personally, but mostly it's a lot of instinctive. It's more instinctive than anything because I just kind of started that way, and it just like, I don't know. The whole, like, some people say it's not a good way to do it, so I don't ever try to tell somebody how to shoot. I just know what works for me and do it. Mine's more like the throw a ball philosophy. Like I just see it and I do it. And I kind of do that. I still do that with a compound bow. I mean, I think it's just like a way that I kind of don't worry about the action. I think like don't get that buck fever is like, I just like, people are like, well, what's your and my process is I just go in and kill the deer. And like, that's a really good process, like, yeah, because you don't have time to work it up in your head. You're just like, well, I'm just going in here and I'm shooting the deer. And it's like, if you make it that simple, then it sometimes is. And then when I start to think about things, that's like anytime I'm shotgun shooting or whatever, anytime I'm like doing some kind of shotgun thing and it's like there's people and we're whatever, and I just start telling myself how to shoot, I will miss every clay that's thrown. But if I just if I'm walking on the hill and I'm half sideways and a chucker flies out at 54 yards and I got to twist, turn and throw it up with my pack on, I'll shoot it in the head every time. It's just like, that's just how I am. And I know not everybody's like that. So definitely more of an instinctive type shot on many things. So
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate everybody showing up. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. That concludes our live Q&A. As the early season approaches, we have a ton of great topics to cover coming up, including pronghorn tactics, drought hunting strategies, maybe some wildfire workarounds. Also, don't forget to send me your hunt questions via Instagram. And also head over to my Remy Warren YouTube channel for some new hunts, videos, how-tos, all that stuff that's going to be coming out. So until next week, I just want you to think about hunting. Yeah, sure, maybe your work will suffer a little bit. It's okay. As long as you think about hunting, everything will be fine, especially with the season coming up. So keep thinking hunting.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
As you know, the Meat Eater live tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.